Every time I hear Cody coming up the porch steps, I know it's him before he even knocks. The third step creaks, and I keep meaning to fix it. I've been meaning to fix it for 20 years now, and I suppose I'm not going to.
He's the only one from this family who still comes by. 19 years old, in college, every Friday without fail. Dennis and Patrice haven't been in this house at the same time in 3 years. My name is Walter Greer. I'm 92 years old, and I spent 30 years as a fire captain in McKinney County. In those 30 years, I walked into hundreds of burning buildings to get strangers out. I wrote evacuation plans. I drew building layouts. I told young guys over and over what you have to do beforehand so you don't die when it counts. My whole career was about preparing for the worst ahead of time for people I'd never met before. And I never wrote one page of paper for my own family. You're probably thinking there must have been a reason, that something got in the way, that it was complicated or expensive or scary. I'll tell you the real reason. But first, let me tell you what happened without that page. Norma passed in March of 2021. She was 84. She'd had rheumatoid arthritis for the last 12 years, but her mind was clearer than mine ever was. Every year, sometime around September, she'd say the same thing. "Walter, get the paperwork done. Go see a lawyer once, and it's finished." I'd nod. I'd say, "Of course, Norm, I'll do it next week." I said that for 30 years. At her funeral, and I'm not making this up, Dennis pulled Patrice aside right there in the church courtyard and told her the land ought to go to him. Not, "Let's talk," not, "Let's see what Dad wants." Right there, before they'd even finished lowering the casket. Patrice turned and walked away. She didn't say goodbye to me. She never came back. I stood at my wife's casket and heard my children arguing about land behind my back. 4 months later, Dennis hired a lawyer. Patrice hired her own. The court found that because there was no will, the house and 4 acres split according to state law, between the surviving spouse and the children, meaning me and both of them in equal shares. Nobody asked what I wanted. Nobody asked who needed the land more. The law doesn't know that Patrice raised 2 kids here that Dennis wants to sell. The law didn't care that Norma wanted this land to stay in the family. While the case goes on, and it's been going on 3 years now, I can't do anything with this house. Can't sell it, can't pass it to Cody, can't transfer it, can't borrow against it. I live in a house that is technically not quite mine anymore, while 3 lawyers sort out what's written in state statutes. I'll do it next week. I said that for 30 years. You know what the strangest part is? After Norma died, I still didn't write a will. 2, 3 months went by. I thought about her, about how empty the house felt, about her coffee cup sitting in the exact same spot on the counter. I didn't think about the paperwork. The lawsuit was already starting. The lawyers were already writing letters back and forth, and I was sitting on the porch, looking out at the field past the fence, thinking, they'll work it out. I spent 30 years writing emergency action plans, and I went completely deaf when the emergency happened in my own house. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. I knew about wills. I knew I needed to get one done.
It wasn't some secret. I'd seen what happens to families who don't have their papers. In order, there were a couple of situations like that in our county, people losing homes after a spouse passed. I heard about it. I nodded, and I still put it off.
Why? Because it didn't feel urgent. Because we had more time. Because seeing a lawyer meant an extra trip, an extra conversation, extra money. Because thinking about a will means thinking about dying, and thinking about dying when you're 50, 60, 70 years old is uncomfortable. You know what I mean? It's not laziness exactly. It's something else, something you turn away from and say, later. You might be thinking the same thing right now. I can see it. I don't have that much to leave. The kids will figure it out. I've still got time. It's too complicated and too expensive. I said every one of those things, word for word, the same phrases you're saying to yourself. And here's what I never told myself, even though I should have. Walter, you spent 30 years telling young firefighters that a fire doesn't wait until you're ready. The fire comes. The only thing that matters is what you did before it got there. Dennis is the older one. He's a smart man, a good father, but he sees land that's worth something, a market that's gone up, and nothing on paper anywhere. When there are no clear rules, people start acting in their own interest. That's not evil, that's human nature. I didn't leave rules, I left a vacuum, and a vacuum is an invitation to fight. Patrice hasn't spoken to her brother in 3 years. Every time she thinks about this house, she goes back to that day in the churchyard. She loves me. I know she does. But she doesn't come here anymore because this place now means a lawsuit, lawyers, and what her brother said standing next to their mother's casket. Cody comes every Friday. He's 19 years old, and he's the only one in this family who isn't in a fight with anybody. He brings groceries, sits with me. Sometimes we watch football. He never asks about the court case. He just shows up. I don't know if he realizes I think about him every time that third step creaks. Last winter, Cody brought his laptop over and showed me something. He'd found data on inheritance disputes in our state. Turns out more than half the cases where there's no will drag on longer than 2 years, and roughly a third of families that go through probate court, according to lawyers who handle these cases, end up cutting ties permanently. Not for a while, for good. I looked at that screen and thought, that's not somebody else's family. That's already us. Cody said quietly, Grandpa, I found a lawyer who handles exactly this kind of thing. You want me to set something up? I sat there thinking about Norma. She said it every September. Walter, get the paperwork done. Every September, and every time I said, sure, next week. I'll do it next week. I said that for 30 years. And sitting there across from my grandson, for the first time I actually heard what I'd been saying. I looked at Cody and said, set it up. The lawyer came to the house. I don't get around well anymore. Young, serious, carrying a folder. He explained it plainly. Without a will, the state doesn't know what you wanted. The state knows the statutes. The law divides things the way it's written, not the way you had it figured in your head for all those years. And then he said something that sat with me wrong. One notarized document, signed while you're alive, does everything you want it to do. It answers questions you never got around to asking out loud. It doesn't take much money. It takes one day. One day. I turned that over in my mind for a whole week. 30 years, and I couldn't find one day. In 30 years of service, I must have written 1,000 instructions. evacuation protocols, building diagrams, action plans for when a fire breaks out. I wrote those for strangers in buildings I'd never been inside, and for my own family. One time, one page, I couldn't find a single day. I found at least 300 next weeks. But one day for Norma and my children, I couldn't find that. I wrote the will. Already after the lawsuit had started. Too late to stop what was already in motion, but not too late for the rest of the estate, and not too late to put my wishes down in writing. The lawyer explained that the court would take it into account as an expression of my intent, even with a case already underway. I wrote down everything I'd meant to write down for 30 years. Which furniture goes to who? The old tools in the garage, Norma's watch, Patrice, my grandfather's hunting rifle, Cody, when he turns 25. I wrote it like I was talking to each of them separately, because that's what it was. When I signed the document, my signature is slow now, my hands aren't what they were. I didn't feel relief. I felt something else, something close to shame, but not quite. Like realizing a door had been standing open your whole life, and you'd been standing outside in the cold, waiting for the right moment to walk through. Cody was there that day. He didn't say anything in particular. He just squeezed my hand. 19 years old. He understood what had happened better than I did at his age. Patrice found out about the will a month later. She called. We talked for 40 minutes, a real conversation for the first time in a long time. She hasn't made up with Dennis, but she said, "Dad, thank you for writing it down." I held the phone for a long time after she hung up, sat there thinking, 3 years is a long time. 3 years in a courtroom is a very long time, but she called, so something is still there. Dennis hasn't called. The case is still going. I've stopped trying to guess what's happening inside him. That only adds pain. Dennis is a stubborn man. He got that from me, and it's not a compliment to either one of us. But I wrote what I wanted to write. That's my handwriting, my signature, my decisions. That's all I have left that I can actually do. I'll do it next week. I said that for 30 years. And when I finally did it, I understood that I'd spent 30 years avoiding one conversation, one document, one day. Last summer, Herb stopped by. He's my neighbor, 90 years old. We've been friends for about 40 years. He brought over a half-empty bottle of bourbon and sat down in the spot where Cody usually sits. He said his son wanted to transfer the house into his name for tax reasons. Said it'd save money on the estate. He asked me what I thought. Should he sign? You know what I felt in that moment. I almost said, "Yeah, probably. You're helping your kid out." The words were already coming. I'd already opened my mouth. Same reflex that held me in place for 30 years. Don't dig into it, just nod, say, "You'll work it out." Then I stopped. I remembered what the lawyer told me. Never sign over property without an independent consultation, even if it's your own son, even if it's just for taxes. Because once the deed is transferred, that son can do what he wants with the house, and you may not have a say anymore. And just for taxes is what they tell you, not what ends up in the documents. When I hear those words now, we'll figure it out. It's just a formality. You trust your son, don't you? I recognize them. The way you recognize an old ache in your joints when the weather turns. I'll do it next week is in that same family of words. I told Herb, "Don't sign anything until you've talked to your own lawyer, not your son's lawyer, yours." He gave me a look. Then he nodded and put the bottle away. The case is still going. Dennis and Patrice still aren't talking. I live in this house, and every morning I drink my coffee on the porch on the side where the sun comes up. Norma loved that spot. We sat out there together for 30 years, watching the field past the fence change with the seasons. Now, I sit alone, and sometimes it feels like her voice is still here, in the creak of that step, in the smell of the grass after it rains. I think about her every morning. I think about how she asked me for one thing, and every time I said, "Next week, Norm, next week, I'll do it next week," I said that for 30 years. And only now do I understand what I was really saying. I was saying, "You're not important enough for me to find one day." I didn't mean it that way, but that's what it came out to. You're watching this, and right now you're probably having one of two thoughts. Either this doesn't apply to me, my situation is different, or I should get around to that one of these days. I know both those thoughts. I lived inside them for 30 years. Let me be straight with you. The way we used to talk in the firehouse. Fire doesn't wait for you to get ready. If you have a house, a bank account, a car, some land, you have something to divide. If you have children, grandchildren, someone you want to leave something to or protect something from, you already have a reason to write one page, not because you're going to die tomorrow, but because while you're alive, you get to decide. After you're gone, the state decides, and the state doesn't know you. It doesn't know your family. It doesn't know what you meant. If you're telling yourself your kids will figure it out, look at my family. Dennis is not a bad man. Patrice is not a bad person. They are ordinary people I put into a situation with no rules. When there are no rules, even good people start pulling toward themselves. That's not their fault. That's my fault. My signature that was never there. In 30 years, I walked into hundreds of burning buildings. But a burning building, you can see it. What happens to your family without one page of paper is a different kind of fire. It starts quiet. One conversation in a churchyard, one hired lawyer, one phone call that goes to voicemail and stays there. And by the time you'd want to put it out, there's nothing left to save. The family burned from the inside. The walls are still standing. But inside, there's nothing. Cody will come on Friday. That third step will creak. I'll pour him some tea, and we'll talk about something that has nothing to do with the lawsuit because he deliberately steers away from the subject so it won't be hard on me. 19 years old, and he understands more than I did at 70. I look at his face, and I think about Norma. Something in the way he tilts his head when he listens. That's exactly her. She would have adored him even more than she already did. I'm not leaving him wealth. I don't have wealth to leave. But I wrote the papers. I wrote that I want this land to stay in the family. I wrote that I want Cody to have the watch that my own father wore. Small things, but they are my decisions, written in my handwriting, while I could still hold a pen. Write your will, not for the lawyer, not for the law, for the Cody in your life, for the Norma in your life.
For the person who climbs your creaky steps every Friday because they love you. and who you don't want to leave standing in the middle of somebody else's fight after you're gone. Do it next week, but this time, actually do it.